What's up, my fellow YouTubers? So I figured I'd talk about how I get into Slayer or metal in general. Um, I grew up, I'm 48, so I grew up 1975, and my first experience with music was my father had a jukebox, and the old-fashioned one, and I remember first seeing Led Zeppelin on the cover, like it was the song was Black Dog, and I'll never forget first playing it and just being like blown away, like holy shit, it's heavy, it's you can understand what they're saying, but it's heavy. And I was a little kid and I broke the jukebox by accident. I kept on pressing the reset button. I just remember the voice going, so, but that was my first experience with loud music, like, wouldn't say heavy, but loud enough to be like, wow, that's pretty cool. And but then I grew up in the 80s, and I was never really into music that much. I mean, I liked what I heard on the radio, but I never, one of my cousins, she could name every star, every, music star on the radio, what song it was, who sung it. And we're talking about like Phil Collins and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, I wish I could do that. I don't know anything about music. And back then, MTV was actually about music and the videos. And there was Bruce Springsteen. And when my mother remarried, I had a stepbrother and two stepsisters. My stepsister would always like Duran Duran, and my stepbrother got me into, White Snake and rap too, like LL Cool J, Run DMC. So I was in a mixture of rap and rock and roll, and I would say like Motley Crue, White Snake. And the heaviest I ever went to was Metallica's And Justice for All, and I'll never forget first hearing that and just being blown away by the song Blackened. I was like, wow, I've never heard anything like that. And back then, Metallica weren't radio friendly, and that's what attracted a lot of the underground people to them. Was that they didn't sell out to the radio. They were like, nope, you're never going to hear this on the radio. The most that you'd hear was one. But even then, it wasn't like a sellout radio hit. It was just because the radio liked it and they made a video out of it. But it was never like, they never sold out at the time as far as like radio friendly metal. Their music was their music. They didn't care if they went mainstream. But at the same time, I got the comic books, which back then, I don't even know if they still have them, but they had like comic books of bands that, how they started off, how they did things. And one of the things that I liked about Metallica was that they said, okay, no Satanism, it's been done to death. In other words, we're going to be heavy, we're going to be loud, we're going to have songs that you're going to like, but we're not going to turn you on to Satanism. And that being said, I liked it because I grew up Catholic, I was Christian. I even remember at one point I was experimenting with new music, and I got a Black Sabbath one. I think it was Paranoid or one of those, and I heard Electric Funeral, and at the time I was just like, oh man, this is so, I wouldn't say offensive, but like something that I knew I should stay away from. Like, I liked metal, but it just seemed too dark, and I ended up throwing the cassette in the woods. And again, it wasn't like a self-righteous thing, but it was a spiritual thing where I was like, okay, this isn't good for me. So that being said, I've never went into a record store at the time. That's what they had, cassettes, and they didn't even have CDs back when I first started getting into music. It was all tapes, and you bought the tape, and you had to have somebody undo the plastic thing, you know what I mean? And so I never would have went in and got Slayer South of Heaven on my own, I guess free will or choice or whatever. If I would have saw this album, I would have been, nope, pass it, So how I got into it was, I went to school. I went out to live with my father. And it was like a country town. And the school was a regional school, so nobody hung out after school. They all went different towns or whatever. And I guess one of the things to do when you live in like that is either to drink or just listen to metal or both. Kind kind of like hibernate out somewhere and just blast metal or whatever the fuck. So I had my own collection of, White Snake, Faster Pussycat, Guns N' Roses, stuff like that. Never going outside of that, Metallica was the heaviest I would listen to. So one day I had my Living Colour tape. The Cult of Personality was huge on the radio, and it's still a big song. I mean, CM Punk has it, right? It's still a catchy song. Everyone loves it. So I had the tape with me, and my friend was a metalhead. I mean, he was into everything. Bands that, back in the 90s, death metal was growing. So it was like the early 90s, late 80s. That's when, death metal was starting to really catch on to the underground people. And he had every friggin' band, every album. You would see him on the street or at a, outside of school, and he would just pull up something. Hey, look what I got. And it would be some band that you'd never heard of that was like fastest drummer, fastest guitarist, and fastest this, so he was a straight metalhead. So he wanted to borrow my Living Colour tape because it wasn't just metal that he liked. It was, he liked everything. So probably not rap, but you get the idea. So I said, okay, here's my Living Colour tape, and he goes, here's a tape for you, and he handed me South of Heaven, Slayer, and I was like, well, A, it's free. B, I didn't choose to go out and buy it. He had it. He let me borrow it for the weekend, and it was just to borrow, just to hear it. And I'll never forget going home and first hearing it. And South of Heaven was when they slowed it down, so it wasn't all heavy, but it was the lyrics that just blew me away. Like, what the fuck? Like, now you got to understand, I was raised Catholic, so it wasn't like I was into shit like this. So when I first heard it, I wouldn't say I was offended as much, but it was that kind of like the Black Sabbath tape thing where, do I really want to touch this shit, right? But I think I heard the whole thing all the way through, and one of the songs that really jumped out at me, and still does, obviously now that it's been a while, but is Ghosts of War, and it's about. It's kind of about war, but it's also about holding grudges, right? It's about, like, when you see that person that fucked you over like 10 years ago, all that emotion comes back, and you can't ignore it, right? And it's like it all comes back like a relapse almost, like holding grudges, which is obviously the opposite of, forgiveness, right? Okay, yeah, you did something bad to me 10 years ago. I forgive him, right? I'm a Christian type of thing, right? It's totally opposite of that, right? It's like, there's that motherfucker, right? Rise goes of war, and it's like, oh shit, you felt it, motherfucker, right? You felt like motherfucking hitting that motherfucker. And but it was like, holy shit, that's too heavy for me. I gotta step away from that type of thing. And then you read the lyrics, and it's like, oh my god, they're doing this and doing that, they're suicide, mandatory suicide, this and that. And later on in life, when you actually dissect, or you read the interviews and you read what it actually means, you start to understand it. Not that you like everything about it, but you understand, like, Ghosts of War could either be about war or holding a grudge. Seasons in the Abyss could be about a literal hell. Obviously it's just like No Quarter by Led Zeppelin. There's no quarter in hell, there's no seasons in hell, so it's a metaphor, right? Literally just being in hell for all eternity. Or you could take that as like a seemingly endless time, like some kind of ordeal that you're going through that seems to last forever. Like, you're in the abyss, you're in the, like, oh my god, as you go insane, like, oh my god, I'm going through this, either some kind of tough time where now I understand it when I get older, and I've been through all the shit that I have been through. And especially when you have loved ones that you trust your whole life fucking you over, stabbing you in the back, doing what it takes to get ahead, then you start to understand it. Not really in a necessarily good way, but like a reflection of what you're going through. Like, oh, okay, this person that I've known my whole life is a total fucking asshole to me all of a sudden for no fucking reason. Now I understand it. And I think Kerry King even said in an interview, if you just went through life normal. You're not going to get it. And when I went through some shit, the more shit I went through, the more I got it. Now, I'm not saying even nowadays when the smoke clears that I like every little thing that they stand for, but I understand it more. I understand, Kerry King is with the Satanism, right? Tom Araya is with the serial killers. Jeff Hanneman brought the war to it. And it's like, oh shit, this chemistry, And everybody that's ever heard Slayer, especially like Rain of Blood, when it first opens up with the Angel of Death, everybody has like been like, every metalhead has done that, like, no matter what walk of life you are, at one point. And and then I don't know, I got introduced to a Christian youth group, and you got to understand, I was raised Catholic, but they labeled me as a Satanist, and I wasn't, and they were ignorant about me. They were gaslighting me. They were trying to tell me what I was, even though I wasn't. And they didn't understand me, they didn't get me, but they thought they nailed me to a T, because all they saw was that I had long hair, I had a pet snake, I like to write. And I like to write horror stories because I always had that talent. But it was a talent that I always had. And I wore, like suicidal tendency shirts, and I, now that I look back, I guess I did attract negative attention to myself, right? Like nowadays, I go in wearing a Patriots sweater and this. Nobody's gonna single me out and say, "Look at that dude, he's a Satanist." The irony about that is that people that could be doing it behind closed doors, and you don't see that. All you see is this, right? But now I get it. Now that I'm older, it's also like, if you're going to go to church, you want to dress a certain way and not attract attention to yourself, because you're in a place where you're expected to act or dress a certain way. Back then, I just had more of a fuck this, who cares? Plus, I didn't work with machines. Now that I work with machines, I'll never have the long hair. I don't want to get my long hair fucking put in the machine, or have to put it back in a ponytail. But back then, I think I threw myself out more. I think when you see this long-haired kid walking around with a snake and having a suicidal tendency shirt, and you have a conversation with him and he says, "Yeah, I write horror stories, I read books on serial killers," I guess you would conjure up an image of that kid's a Satanist. But I wasn't. Okay, I was raised Catholic. I accepted Christ at an early age. I love reading the Bible. And yes, I do like reading Stephen King, and I do write like him, but it's not all hard. It's good versus evil if you take the time to dissect it and understand what exactly it is that's going on. Read the whole book, listen to their side, not just one side, before you make an opinion. And I've learned that in journalism in high school. Don't be biased. Listen to both sides. Educate yourself before forming an opinion. So my opinion on Slayer is, yes, I think it could be dangerous. At the same time, I think the reason why they're so popular is because just about all of them are atheists. They don't really believe it. They talk about it, but if you dissect it, it's a double meaning. It could either mean the literal or the figurative, and that's what makes it so double vision, or I know there's a word for it. You get what I'm saying, right? And then you read the early interviews, and it's like, oh, this is how that happened. That's how that happened. And not only that, Tom Araya is Catholic, and yeah, people bash him and call him a hypocrite, but I think that's moral jealousy, because I think there's a lot of hypocrisy in metal in general. I think a lot of satanic bands are closet Christians. Even Ozzy has said that. But I think the resentment doesn't come from, oh, look at Tom Araya, is such a hypocrite. I don't think that comes from him personally as much as the success that he's had. In other words, he was able to cash out and retire at an early age and still live his Christian lifestyle, and still go to church with his kids, and still, live a luxurious life, knowing that he was in a big band, but still I don't know if repent is the word, but like more or less, okay, I did Slayer, now I'm this Christian that takes my family to church, get on with my life type of thing. I think that's the resentment, is that he could still cash out and live his $1 million lifestyle, and at one time still have done everything. I think there's that jealousy and resentment. That's why he gets attacked the most. I've even heard, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that Glenn Benton is Catholic, but he'd never admit it, and that's the lead singer of Deicide, and I've never gone that route. I've never gotten into that. My cousin, though, on the other hand, we would talk back and forth about the bands that we liked, and he would say, oh yeah, I like a guy with an upside down cross burned into his head. And I was like, no, I never went that far, right? I think the heaviest I've ever went is Slayer, Pantera. I've tried death metal, I just could not get into it. My friend likes black metal, to each his own. That's like the heaviest of the heavy. It's just, I think mine is thrash, is the heaviest that I've ever went to. And but yeah, this is how I got into Slayer, and I've had somebody else tell me that when they were in the military, they slipped him, like what was it, Rain and Blood, and which makes sense. If you're out there in the field, you're fighting terrorists, you're not going to listen to Christian music going Jesus this, Jesus that. You're going to listen to Lamb of God or Slayer, something that's going to set your mind to right. You almost like need that mentality. Not only does the military train you for that, but the music trains you for that, more or less, right? And bands don't even know how to react when people say, oh, your music helped me like kill a bunch of people over there. They don't know how to react to that. What do you say to that? But it's the truth, right? But yeah, let me know in the comments, how did you get into metal? Were you always just a metalhead, or were you just like, did somebody just slip you a tape and that's how you get into it? Let me know in the comments. But yeah, I'll do more blogs on music in general in the future. All right, peace out, my fellow YouTubers.